lead the Regulatory Affairs, Reimbursement, and Markets Access team at RQM+. And this has been a great conference, especially bringing in all my background in terms of product development. I used to be an ex-lead reviewer from BSI, tech team lead, clinical team lead. So very well versed in EU regulations, right? And currently in the contract research organization that is RQM+, handling clinical trials, reg and quality consulting. We have a very advanced analytical lab. I get to see all aspects of product lifecycle and the impact of it on patients via regulations and reimbursement. So from that perspective, this has been an excellent conference because it has reinforced the importance of needing to think strategically, right? Acting like a systems engineer, and then eventually winning like a reimbursement ninja. And what a metaphor we had, because the opening lecture by the chief engineer of the James Webb Telescope really helped ram in the point, essentially, that you rarely win with isolated brilliance. You really need a systems levels approach and execution. And so far, this conference has absolutely exemplified it. So yeah, happy to be here. Absolutely. I was very excited, very thrilled to be able to give that presentation, which was focused on a life cycle centric design, right? Every part of your product's journey is tied to each other, and any misalignment anywhere and the entire structure is a lot weaker. I think the overarching message that I wanted to give is that FDA approval is not really the win per se. It's not the summit. It's essentially the base camp. And the real climb is coding, coverage, and payment, meaning reimbursement, right? You could have the approval. You could be a PubMed legend. Your KOLs may be glowing. But if you're not able to make money, if somebody's not paying you, economically, you will still lose, right? And that's the important message to understand. Approval is just the start. It gives you the right to start the real fight, right? Winning in terms of coverage is where you really want to be. Yeah, there is, I've been in the industry for a while. And if you really look at the political environment, it's really never been all that good. I've rarely been in a time where everybody says, oh, this is it. There is free-flowing capital. There is enough talent available. There are always situations where you have to pivot, you have to adjust, you have to weather storms, and that's not going to change, right? Whatever the administration may be, money's always going to be short. You're always going to have to meet timelines. You're always going to be up against revised and stronger regulations. Regulations are here for a reason. Very often regulations are a response to what's happening out there in the market, right? And a response to newer technologies. So I can tell you one thing. I don't see innovation being stifled in the face of stricter regulations. And this may be a contrary view to mostly what people think. So I want to reiterate it. I don't see innovation being stifled because of stricter regulations. What can negatively impact innovations is the uncertainty around the interpretation of these regulations by the regulatory agency here in the US and the notified bodies in the EU. Uncertainty in terms of interpretation is one thing, and then uncertainty in terms of timeframes is yet another. Because as we know in the EU, timeframes have considerably lengthened. But we also know that notified bodies are working really hard. They're adding resources. They're working really hard to become more and more responsive. So I think we will reach steady state. We'll never be at a time that the EU was 10 years ago, right? Even the FDA has moved on. Change is the only thing that's constant, right? And that's true even for regulations. But we're at a point where we need some consistency as far as interpretations and timelines are concerned. Other than that, I think regulations are only going to get tougher, especially with the advent of AI. Now, that adds a whole other layer to complexity here. So industry needs to be prepared and braced for complexity and tougher regulations. But on the regulator's part, we need to see a little bit more certainty in terms of timelines and interpretations. I have a lot of thoughts about AI in general, but I'm going to confine it to the trial space and the regulatory space. I think AI has a tremendous role to play in where we are headed from a regulatory standpoint, from a clinical trial standpoint. I think just yesterday, the FDA released ELSA, which is the AI agent that's going to be helping with reviews. Likely, that's going to help speed up reviews, right? But that's going to bring in a host of other challenges that industry will need to evaluate and provide feedback to the FDA. But this is only the start. I don't think we can avoid using AI or prevent the advent of AI from impacting our lives in regulations. It's going to happen. I think it's going to simplify lives. Like, for example, when computers came in, it simplified lives. When Google came in, it simplified life even more. I think AI is going to do that even more, right? But the human interaction and the level of human brains needed, I fear could get dumbed down, especially from a kid's perspective. And that's not a comment on regulations, but that's a comment at society in general. Somehow we've got to maintain that intellectual edge where we retain the ability to still be able to think and still be able to be discernible with the advent of AI. And that's going to be a significant challenge that society is going to have to brace for and address. But coming back to, say, clinical trials, AI has a tremendous role to play in clinical trials to automate things, to help facilitate the various workflows that you have to deal with, the many different systems that are used in clinical trial management, data capture, data management, safety reporting. I think AI has a lot to offer in terms of automation and helping save costs ultimately for the sponsor, and as well as shorten timelines. I think in terms of innovation, in terms of benefit to society at large, yes, all of us have a personal story when it comes to why we work in MedTech, right? We've all seen how beneficial it can be to be able to use technology to save somebody's life. We've even seen the impact of it when technology doesn't arrive in time, right? And to put all of this in a nutshell, I think we owe it as much to the healthcare system to ensure that the healthcare system remains in fine fettle, especially from an economic standpoint, as much as we owe it to our patients to be clinically brilliant. And I think this conference has gone a long way in reiterating that. We have a responsibility not just to the patient, but also to make sure that the healthcare system remains in fine economic conditions so that it can continue serving mankind for time to come. And for that, I want to reiterate the message. Think like a strategist, right? Execute like a systems engineer, and win like a reimbursement ninja. You need all three to go hand in hand.